Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, and you're listening to BriefingsDirect. Our next Innovation Thought Leadership panel discussion focuses on how expert user communities around technologies and solutions create powerful digital business improvements. As an example, we'll explore how the Citrix Technology Professionals Program, or CTP, gives participants a larger say in essential strategy initiatives, such as enabling mobile work styles. We'll learn more about CTP and how ongoing dialogue between vendors and experts provides the best end-user experiences. And with that, please join me in welcoming our panel. We're here with Douglas Brown. He's the founder of DABCC.com in Sarasota, Florida. Welcome, Douglas.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're also here with Rick Dellinger. He's an independent technologist and business visionary in Sacramento, California. Welcome, Rick.
Pleasure, Dana. Thanks for having me.
Jo Harder joins us. She's the cloud architect at D&H and an industry analyst at Virtualization Practice in Fort Myers, Florida. Welcome, Jo.
Pleasure to be here.
And we're also here with Steve Greenberg, president of Thin Client Computing in Scottsdale, Arizona. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Dana. It's great to be here with you and my community friends here.
Well, Doug, let's start with you. We hear so much nowadays about user experience. It's top of mind, a differentiator for a lot of technology providers and solution providers and cloud providers, yet tech user groups for decades have been building the bridges between vendors and users. So a different sort of flavor of user experience. You might say that you're, as a community-based organization, the original user experience providers. So tell me, what is CTP as a user group, and how ultimately does your user experience translate into improvements for the Citrix community and ecosystem?
Sure. Well, that's a good question. I've actually been a CTP since the conception of the CTP program, and within the Citrix community since 1997, something like that, when I first met Rick and Steve and the old guys. And what's neat about the CTP program and the Citrix community in general is that we're really able to bring a bunch of great, talented people together, and then in return, take that combined experience and knowledge and then share that out with other people. And what was interesting, what got me into the community way back when, was the fact that there was just no information. You were just really out on your own trying to solve people's problems, right? And when we were able to then put that in a community, then we just all exponentially got better. And what I've found through the Citrix community in general, the Citrix users groups that Citrix has really recently started, and of course the CTP program, is that you're always better together, and I think that's the biggest takeaway for me from really not just the 10 years of CTP, but the 15, 16 years of being in the greater Citrix community itself.
Mm-hmm. Steve, this advocacy role, how well and effective does it work? How much traction are you getting?
I'd say it's fairly amazing how well it works. Doug referred to the old days, so we have kind of like a 1997 to 2006, 2007 era where you didn't have the feedback loop, and products evolved slowly, and we'd see a new product release and go, why did they do that? And so this passionate group, really because of the internet, because we're all kind of little freaks in our little neighborhood somewhere around the world, and we all found each other, come together with such a passion. When Doug was speaking, we haven't calculated it, but it's in excess of 1,000 years of hands-on experience between this group of 50 or so people. And it works. And Citrix has come to value it in particular. Other companies are following the model and developing community programs. And it's really invigorating to learn something from the true end user, the customer, the end user, bring it back to headquarters, so to speak, and see the products evolve and change.
Yeah, it's really a 360-degree type of program, right? Like you mentioned, it's not just for us. It's also benefits Citrix, and then of course everyone, the customer and the the engineers, what have you. It's really a 360 type of benefit.
And so, as was mentioned, we're in this era of social media, and people can be their own publisher, and they can be earphone and a megaphone at the same time. So, Rick, do you feel like you're representing a large group, and how do they communicate to you what they're feeling?
I'd say, yeah, I do feel like I represent a pretty large group, especially when you start wandering the halls of Citrix Synergy. You know, it's like the recurring college reunion or high school reunion that happens every year. So I'd say, yeah, I definitely feel like we represent a much broader audience. And we've also got people that represent perspectives from various different geos across the world, different industries, industry functions, different customer bases, even different seats in the ecosystem, the partner community, end user customer, other technology provider companies. In terms of communication, you know, some of the tools that evolved over the last 10 years. It's a good point, Steve. I hadn't really thought about the fact that we kind of have two different eras. Yeah.
Right.
The era of the last 10 years has really been one of greatly increased communication and transparency. And that's one of the things that the CTP program is fantastic about. And Steve had mentioned that a lot of the other vendors are starting to really use this as a model and build their community programs around. Is that, you know, this group of people is very passionate about Citrix technologies. Really two things: passionate about Citrix technologies and passionate about touching the lives of others. You combine the two of those and you put us behind a closed door in a communication opportunity to have a very real communication with the leaders and the developers and product managers and such at Citrix. I'd like to say that we've impacted some very, very substantial and positive change in Citrix. Helped them stop going down some roads that were very disastrous, recover from some roads that started to be disastrous or were dead ends. And, ultimately improve things.
And to Doug's 360 comment, we continue to be inspired by what they bring out and put in front of us as a possible vision. It's incredible. And just so you understand, we're usually locked in a room for 2 full days, approximately 10 to 12 hours, a couple times a year. And it gets real fast, like Rick says. It gets deep.
Yeah,
it's like an inside family having a family discussion that gets really hot, but it's two-way. And perhaps at first it was us saying, you got to fix this stuff.
Yeah.
But now it's inspiring to see what comes out, that they touch the community and say, we're thinking about this. How would that work? Really cool.
Thanks, Steve.
And I like the fact that you mentioned it's really two different eras, because prior to the CTP program, and I was around when they started this, is that we really had to push something like this for Citrix, because a typical corporation back then was not about outside feedback per se. They did not blog. There was no social media, right? It was very controlled message. And nowadays the message is, you know, obviously they need to control it, but it's just wide open. It's a wide open world out there today.
Thanks, Douglas. And Joe, you're like a focus group in a sense, but interactive and wide-ranging in terms of your impact and getting information from the field. So as a focus group, what are you accomplishing here this week at Citrix Synergy 2016?
Well, let me first step back and say that we're under NDA with Citrix. So these closed-door discussions that Steve mentioned previously, those are very private discussions. The product managers go into what's happening, what they're thinking about for future products, and that's really the basis for those discussions. So as we're having these discussions, as we are, I never really thought about us as like a focus group, but we are. It's really great that we can give the feedback to each other, and because we have such varied experiences, because we've got varied expertise, there's some products that I know really well that the person sitting next to me might touch once a year. So we've got a complete variety in the group, and it's really great to be able to have those discussions as a focus group, if you will, and to be able to provide that feedback to the folks at Citrix and really to each other as well, because we do learn a lot from each other.
So I should think that because Citrix has so many different lines, different products, they've inherited things through acquisition, they've built things organically, that no one user consumes them in the same way. What are you seeing in terms of adoption? What would you say is the most interesting part of Citrix's line and solutions in this particular day and age, because things have changed so much. Rick?
The most interesting thing for me, and in our little focus group, if you want to call it that, community representation, I tend to be one of the ones that advocates very heavily for the cloud and for increasing the pace of evolution, helping drag the traditional Citrix enterprise customer base further into the new world that we live in. So for me, the most exciting stuff has definitely got to be the cloud. So the evolution of Citrix's cloud services, now called Citrix Cloud, and all the stuff underneath it, that stuff to me is fantastic. And that really, it's monumental, not just for the consumer base, but also for Citrix, because it gets them into the world of rapid prototyping and rapid evolution, consistent, evergreen products and services. And also starts to put them into a different world where it's cloud-based consumption and pricing, right? Where you've got to, every day, every week, every month, every year, you've got to continue to prove your value and improve your value and provide a level of service. And if you don't, you're cut off. The customer has the opportunity to walk away.
So Windows 10 as a service on Azure, pretty interesting for both Microsoft and Citrix.
Very interesting indeed. And one of the things that's most exciting about that for me, if you look at any of the traditional enterprise technology vendors that are out there, they've been selling based on this capital expenditure model into the enterprise, right? They go spend all these big bucks and, they drop the stuff in. And their entire ecosystems, their sales teams, even their product development, their product guidance, there's so much in a company and ecosystem gets tied to that. And then you look at the polar opposite end of that is the cloud, where it's consumption-based pricing, like the attributes that I mentioned a little bit earlier.
So it could be quite interesting on adoption patterns. We could be seeing all sorts of new models perking up, and that could be interesting for both companies as well as the end-user organizations.
Well, in my mind, it increases the transparency, right, on both sides. So Citrix knows and understands who's using what and what they're not using also. And the customer has an opportunity to vote with their dollars, not just once up front when they're seeing all the stars of the sales pitch, but on a month or a yearly basis. And that's actually the most exciting part to me, because Microsoft has made that pivot now, right, with Office 365 and Azure and all that product family. They've got their ecosystem brought around, and they're showing the world now that it's possible to go from being a traditional enterprise software vendor or technology vendor to being a cloud vendor. So it's exciting for me in this, and what I see as the future of Citrix and of the community is Citrix getting over that hump themselves and really getting into, I guess in some ways you probably call it like Citrix 4.0. They've reinvented themselves many times over the years.
Steve, thin client computing, probably an interesting perspective, but tying that to the cloud, any device, any cloud, what do you see as some of the most interesting developments?
To me, it's that push forward, and it's the new CEO, Kirill, making a strong statement that we're going to the cloud, as Rick says, taking it forward. But the most exciting thing for me, because day in, day out, I architect and implement and design, is to take this suite and to fit it to the organization. Every organization is different, and the best part of my job is going in and learning a new organization and what it is they do and how they do it. And inevitably, something Citrix is doing makes that better. Now, as Rick said, we just have more options. Now, if this organization needs cloud, it's the best delivery model. Perhaps they're distributed around the world or some other factor. Now they can do it. They've got Citrix behind them, it's casting the vision. So it's the flexibility, it's the power and excitement that you get from the move at the speed of the business, not IT saying no, not IT saying, well, I can't do that new product line because our system's blah, 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 blah. You say, well, hey, if we need to move quick, throw it in Azure. Let's get on to that new offering.
Say yes.
Say yes. There you go.
Joe, virtualization has never been as prominent as it is now. What do you see from the virtualization perspective with the new products and the new embrace of virtualization at multiple abstractions?
Well, my perspective, I'm looking at it from the banking sector, because that's what I live and breathe. And I'm looking at it from security, compliance, all of everything that comes along with the finance industry. So I look at that probably a little bit more cautiously than most, but what I find pretty interesting is that Citrix is really tying in security end-to-end. Some of the sessions here at Synergy have talked about the whole security piece. And yes, we want to be progressive, but you got to do it very securely. So that's one of the pieces that I really am embracing from a virtualization standpoint. From the standpoint of finance, it should be that there should be no data on the workstation. You shouldn't be able to walk into a bank and, if somebody were to steal that client device, they should not be able to walk off with any social security numbers, no NPI, nothing of the sort. And that's, to me, what excites me about virtualization and tying that together, bringing the way that Citrix has all the moving parts. I think in the future, the next step for the banks, hopefully, they're getting into wireless, they're getting into mobility, and I think that Citrix is very well poised for that. So the future is bright.
Right. So security was the original big use case for VDI. Nothing on the client, but now our clients are everywhere. So it's really how do we get the data from the edge to the edge, but securely. Let's go to Douglas. What are some of the key points from your perspective in terms of the Citrix product line and how that impacts users that you feel you represent?
That's a good question. To me, I'm a Zen app baby. So I like the ability, or I see the cloud as the really truly the information highway, right? It's the enabler to allow us to bring things to market quicker, and then Zen app as that ultimate tool to then give access to the applications anywhere, any place, anytime. The old Citra mantra, right? And I don't care if it's 2016 with all the stuff that we do today, or if it's 1999. At the end of the day, I've never met an end user that comes into the company and says, gee, I can't wait to use Windows 10, or gee, I can't wait to use that new Cisco Core router they just bought, right? They say, come into to work and said, oh no, I have to do a spreadsheet today, right? They don't even talk about Excel. And what Citrix is able to do, with all these different technologies we're bringing around, be it the cloud or mobility or whatever, back to the user experience piece, is that Citrix is able to give the end user a better, faster time to market for them, right? At the end of the day, they're able to work better from any place, any time. And for me, I've actually been living a lot in Sarasota, but also I commute to Berlin, Germany, sort of an interesting commute. But it doesn't matter where I live, right? And this is the same story that we've said for 15 years. So it's not about a new story. It's just about bringing more components to make that, to fulfill that destiny of, a better user experience. And what's IT there for? It's to enable the users to do their job better. And I think ultimately that's what Citrix is about. And everything else is just fluff, right? Everything else is just the machinery.
Rick, when we think about changes in Citrix over the past couple of years, and there's been a lot of them, one of the things that strikes me is they seem to be much more interested in strutting their stuff as to what their network intelligence capabilities are. A lot more discussion of NetScaler and how that integrates to mobility, to security, big data analytics, cloud. So tell me a little bit, do you agree with me that the NetScaler and the intelligent networks component is more prominent, and how does that play into the future?
So NetScaler was, by anybody's measure, one of the best acquisitions Citrix ever made. They got some fantastic technology. And some of the things that we've been able to do with NetScaler in our tool bag as we're out solving problems and helping customers take things to the next level is just mind-boggling. So I'm actually really thrilled at the change. It seems like they've finally started to figure out a better way to both communicate what NetScaler is and its role in this whole game, so to speak. But really, I'd mentioned, you asked me about the Microsoft Citrix relationship a bit earlier. Some of the stuff that Citrix is doing now in that partnership with NetScaler to start incorporating and leveraging the NetScaler and its unique layer of visibility between the user and the applications to do some really amazing new things. So I think it's fantastic that they finally found their language. NetScaler is starting to get its feet underneath it. Although you could argue it's had its feet underneath it. I mean, it's been a $1 billion plus business for Citrix for a couple of years now.
Joe, how about you in terms of security and in the banking sector in particular, intelligent network services, something really impressive, important, or what?
Just to expand on what Rick said, I think what Citrix is doing with NetScaler is great. Some days I feel like I don't fully understand, and I'm immersed in these technologies, but then you learn something else that NetScaler can do for you. There's more, and it's in there. It's a matter of finding out exactly how to best use it, and then going ahead and using the product. So I think NetScaler, I totally agree with Rick. There's the sky's the limit on it.
Yeah. Well, NetScaler used to be the realm of the packet trace reading junkies, and a lot of their load balancing is the easiest thing that people could use to describe what NetScaler does. But that whole world is just fraught with massive acronyms and crazy technology and terminology and standards and stuff that the normal human being or the business person in particular is just mind-boggling and baffling. So I think it's great that Citrix is finally finding some language to be able to use to demystify a little bit of that and show that underneath all that mysticism and the support for all these crazy new fancy TLAs and acronyms, that there's some really amazing, powerful business value there, just waiting to be unlocked and leveraged.
Steve, mobile work styles as opposed to mobility or device or bring your own, how far do you feel that your community contacts have gotten in that direction of a mobility style change rather than simply doing something with a smaller device in more places?
That's a great question, because I think this particular group has been at the core of this for some time, and we've taken some very notable large organizations and completely transformed them. People work from home. People work on a multitude of devices. I can be sitting at the desktop in the office, grab a laptop and go, jump in a cab, take my phone, and there's that seamless experience. We really are there. At this point, it's just a matter of getting it sort of wider infiltrated, getting people aware of what they can do. To this day, although it seems old to us, I still go into new client sites and opportunities and say, you could do this. And they say, really? I didn't know I could do that. So it's there, but now the society is catching up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It also seems that some of the file share demonstrations and announcements show the benefit of the whole greater than the sum of the parts when you can integrate with cloud, with devices. Any thoughts about the power of an integrated file share rather than just the plain vanilla one-size-fits-all type of cloud-based file share?
Well, I think that's the final layer that makes this mobile work style a reality, because before, if you could remote in the XenApp style that Doug was referring to, you could get your job done. But now that you can transmit data securely, now when it hits your phone, you're working on it natively. I go into the subway and the signal drops. Well, that file is there, and I can edit it, sign it, get my signal back, and go. So it's taken that virtualization mobility to a level now where it can travel, and it can be seamless.
And that's an intelligent container. So if your requirements around privacy or security mean that you have to have control over what that session is and does, you can get that. Douglas, how important is that intelligent container when put in the context of an intelligent network?
Oh, it's extremely important. It's important from every aspect of the business, right? So, and I think that nowadays we are able to do those things where we've never been able to in the past at the level that we are to now. It can't be understated as much as how important those components are, and I think it's really you can, and it's some of the things that the other guys have said today. I think it comes down to maturity. The technology and the vision has been there, or the vision's been there. The technology is coming around, and now with technology such as that, it's mature, and then we're able to achieve all of our goals, from business to end users to what have you.
I would also add, too, Citrix demonstrated this morning, I think, a new capability that wasn't there before. We're all familiar with the Dropbox model where I can send a file, but once you send it, it's out there in the wild. And what they showed today was sending a file and then changing its status. So that even though that person had received the file and looked at it, when the status changed, they could no longer see it. And that's the home run.
Yeah.
That's the piece that was not
Absolutely.
part of this capability before.
And
Thanks, Steve.
I
Joe?
tweeted this morning that this new capability really propelled ShareFile into being the file sharing solution for business. There are a lot of other solutions out there, but they're really not suitable for business. They don't provide that level of security, and the signature signing enables. Think about the security impacts of that, the legalities. They've got it covered. I think there's a lot more coming. Once some of the states start to add the notaries and how the digital signature can be incorporated as the notarized signature, wow.
Many business processes really do get that mobile style of work as a result, and rather than just repaving cow paths, you're really doing something quite new and different. Before we sign off, I'd like to allow our listeners and readers to get more information on CTP, the Citrix Technology Professionals Program. If they were interested in learning more, maybe taking some role themselves, where should they go?
Definitely the CTP website. That's a great place to find out more about this group and what they do. However, I'd say even more importantly, is much more accessible to a lot of people. Look at the Citrix user group community out there. There's a lot of fantastic people that, we're blessed by having the opportunity to be able to kind of represent a big base. But, in a lot of localities around the world, actually, the Citrix user group communities have been doing some fantastic things.
Sort of federation of groups around the world.
Absolutely.
I would add to, blog, tweet, turn out for user groups, come out to Synergy, come out to Summit if you're one of the reseller partners, make yourself known. We're a community of kind of almost crazy enthusiasts. We have a ridiculous level of interest and passion. We have a tendency to find each other, and we're always amazed to see new people come up from a place or a country or a business we never heard of with new solutions. A great event that's happening today is the Geek Speak Tonight. We've done a Geek Ovation program where people submit their projects and their work and come up and get recognized for it and have a little contest. Endless possibilities. Just get out there and start communicating.
Participate.
And have fun.
Douglas?
In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be going to Norway with Rick for one of the best Citrix users groups around the world and the oldest. But that advocacy, if I could spit that word out, which I can't, it's been a long week already. It's only halfway done, right? A program is another thing for guys looking to get into the CTP program or just sharing knowledge in general. Start up a blog. Have some fun. Share knowledge, right? I've always said knowledge is not power. Power is in dispersing of knowledge.
Well, great. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a BriefingsDirect discussion focused on how expert user communities around technologies and solutions can create very powerful digital business improvements. We've heard how the Citrix Technology Professionals Program, or CTP, gives participants a large say in essential strategy initiatives at Citrix. And we've learned how ongoing dialogue between vendors and experts is providing, ultimately, the best user experiences. So please join me now in thanking our guests. We've been here with Douglas Brown, the founder of DABCC.com in Sarasota, Florida. We've also been here with Rick Dellinger. He's an independent technologist and business visionary in Sacramento, California. Jo Harder joins us. She's the cloud architect at D&H and an industry analyst at Virtualization Practice in Fort Myers, Florida. Steve Greenberg has been with us. He's president of Thin Client Computing in Scottsdale, Arizona. And lastly, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us as well for the Citrix-sponsored Business Innovation Thought Leadership Discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.